I'm so excited to introduce you to the best website designers out there. We have a brand new partnership with Session Sites. It is where good therapy meets brilliant design, and they get your website switched over or built in less than 2 weeks. They fine tune your messaging, use science backed user experience methodology, and work exclusively with mental health professionals. In fact, new clients right now are going to get 3 free therapy marketing strategy calls with their creative director of Session Sites if you book today. You're not going to want to miss this. Head on over to sessionsites.com/Joe. Again, that's sessionsites.com/Joe. Get the website of your dreams today. Sessionsites.com/Joe. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1189. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. We do this show several times a week, helping you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. And, one of those aspects is being able to think about the future, to be able to forecast, predict, to do some of your best analysis. One of my first podcast interviews, it had to have been around episode 50, was with a friend of mine, Noel Goodman, who, as just like a side gig thing, started getting trained in all of these algorithms to predict different things. And I remember that like the science of prediction was just so interesting to me. But trust takes a lot more than that. It takes a lot more than just kind of forecasting. There's all sorts of ways that we can make our brands more trustworthy. There's ways that we can personally be more trustworthy, that we can, in our communication with our staff, develop trust. With so many things that are happening in the world, whether it's AI or politics or just, relationship issues, trust is something that transcends all of that. And we're going to be doing our Future of series where we're digging in to people that have the pulse on particular areas. And today we're starting with the future of trust, which to me is a great place to start because human level, to me, it's so important to say the work that we do, whether it's your practice or my podcast and the membership stuff we do, the books that we write, or just in our relationships, the human level is what makes this experience worth it. It makes this lifetime that we're spending creating our own meaning in a lot of ways. It makes it fulfilling. It makes it not just boring. We get to have that human side. So starting with trust with this is so exciting. And today I have Marcus Sheridan with me. Marcus is a globally recognized communications expert, best-selling author, and captivating keynote speaker. His expertise spans the topic of sales, leadership, marketing, AI, personal development, and trust. Starting after college, Marcus founded a business that grew into the world's most trafficked swimming pool company, revolutionizing effective communication in the business landscape. He ignited the They Ask, You Answer movement, empowering businesses to embrace transparency in their marketing and communications. His book, They Ask, You Answer, has sold over 100,000 copies. Marcus, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. Swimming pools. How'd you get into swimming pools after college?
Well, I don't think anybody ever says, "Hey, I want to be a pool guy when I grow up." At least not for the
Everybody
most part.
says that. It's always fireman, actor, pool guy. It's like in that order.
Right, but I was working near DC, and I didn't really like my job very much there. And I came back to where I grew up. It's called the Northern Neck of Virginia. My two friends had just started a swimming pool company, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to run the store here until we?" While we're working installing pools out in the field. And I said, sure, until I find what I want to do with my life. And like 6 months later, they said, would you become a partner? And so it's funny how, life takes you down different roads. But if I hadn't become a pool guy, I wouldn't have ever become a speaker. And like my whole life changed because of that simple little decision. It's very, very unexpected. Very unexpected.
Now, I think a lot of those early life things we realized taught us maybe unexpected lessons. I think about when I in college was in this terrible emo band, and my brother and I were in this band, and we'd have to figure out places that would have us or bands that were better than us that we could open for. And like, a lot of just the merchandising and the promotion of these shows. To me, I learned so much about just, promoting a counseling practice that, there's ways that, I learned in that, just some of these early life lessons that still, I think apply to me. I learned how to stand out in, a competitive band market, things like that. What were some of those early lessons that you learned in the pool world?
Well, for me, it was interesting. We had in 2009 started the company in 2001. We were pushing to grow it, and we were just fighting every day, like we tend to do, is to fight to grow our businesses. And then the market collapsed, if folks remember, in 2008. And that was a really bad time for pool companies. A lot of pool companies around the country went out of business at that time. And it was during this period of frustration and of worry that I said, okay, well, we've got nothing to lose. Looks like we might have to file bankruptcy. And if that happened, I was going to lose my home. My two business partners were going to lose their homes. And so I just really started to learn about the internet and started reading all these fancy phrases online, like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media. And what I heard in my simple pool guy mind was, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns, and you're willing to address those online through text, through video, you just might save your business. So I said, well, that sounds really, I mean, I can do that. And naturally, like, I had this like inclination towards teaching and communicating and listening. And so I said, we're going to be the best teachers in the world when it comes to, in our case, fiberglass pools. And that's what we became. And within like 2 years, we had become the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world, to what you said. But the way that we had done it is we had taken the most common questions we'd received over the years, Joe, and I just brainstormed them all out, and then I answered them one by one with text and with video online on our website, on social, etc. And you might hear that and say, "Well, that sounds pretty obvious," but it's actually not obvious to a lot of folks. Let me give you a perfect example, and then I think it'll like anybody that's listening to this, certainly any clinician is going to listen to this and say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." So one of the most common questions I was asked all the time when somebody was shopping for a pool is, "Hey, so like, can you give me a sense for how much is something like this going to cost?" Well, up until that point, no swimming pool company in the world had addressed online how much does an in-ground pool cost to install. Why? Well, we make these arguments like, well, if people know how much it costs, we're going to scare them away. And then we say things like, well, if we talk about costs, then we're going to give our secrets away to our competitors. And then we say things like, well, every job is different. There's a lot of variables. And so therefore it depends. And so we make these reasons up, whereas the whole time, the buyer, the consumer, the person that's trying to spend their money, they're thinking, I just need to get a sense for this. Can you just help me understand? And so we were the first company in the world that addressed that question online. And to make a long story very short, on that one article alone, I wrote an article in 2009 that was a guide to fiberglass pool costs. And I really explained it. I was the first person, like I said, in the world to explain this online. And that one single article, we've tracked the sales that came from it, has generated over $35 million in sales at one single article. It took me 45 minutes to write at my kitchen table. And I've seen this happen over and over again, where you get a common question that you hear every single day, yet you haven't addressed it online. Well, why not? Why haven't you? Because if they're asking you in person, you better believe they're asking on the front end. They're researching this, and they're going to AI at this point. They're going to Google. They're going to do whatever. They're going to get their answer. So the question becomes, who are they going to get their answer from? Are they going to get it from you, or are they going to get it from somebody else? And so, what I always teach folks now today is, listen, if you want to become the most known and trusted brand in your market, you have to be willing to do four things. And obviously, we can talk about these things more elaborately. But number one, you got to be willing to say online what others aren't willing to say. Number two, you got to be willing to show online what others aren't willing to show, specifically through video. Number three, you've got to be willing to sell in a way others aren't willing to sell. And that's possible for anyone. And finally, number four, you got to be more human than anyone else during this process. In other words, the human side of your brand has to pop off online, and the people need to feel like they know you, they've met you, even though you've never known and met them. And so I'll repeat those. You got to say what others aren't willing to say online, show what others aren't willing to show, sell in a way others aren't willing to sell, and you got to be more human in the process of doing those previous three things. If you do
Mm.
that, you'll become the most known and trusted brand in your market. Now, I say that, and there's a lot to it, but those are the 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand.
Wow, I feel like the first three, there's lots of ways I can think about those, like say online what others won't say, show, sell. I think that the authenticity, the humanity side of being online can be really that to me is often the most challenging. I think personally, like I talk pretty openly on this podcast. I feel like when people listen to the podcast, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I understand you." And when then we meet at a conference or something, they're like, "Oh, you're like the same person I hear on the podcast." It's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I am."
Yeah.
But I know I personally struggle with on say Instagram or TikTok. There's so many ways people think through how to do social media or do like YouTube videos in regards to just expressing who you are as a human. Sometimes you hear people do business with people, and other times you hear you got to build your brand. Don't be as personal. Um, Help me understand how I can, with practice the practice, do this better at becoming more human online.
Yeah. There's a lot of directions that we could take that. I think it's a really relevant question. Here's just a few, um, like food for thought. Number one, let go of the need to sound smart online. And you might think that's not a big problem. It's actually a really big problem, Joe. A lot of people when they start to put themselves out there online, they don't even realize it. There's like this some conscious component that takes over where they're trying to prove that they belong on that stage.
Hmm.
And the harder you try to prove it, the more we have this almost like this BS meter that tells us like this person, there's something about them that I don't implicitly trust. And again, it's because they're trying to prove that they belong on that stage. It's actually the same. It's the same piece of comment that I give to folks that I've been speaking full time for 14 years, almost 13 years, around the world. It's been amazing, and hundreds of events and gigs. I get new speakers all the time come to me and saying, "Hey, could you look at some of my content? I've got this clip of me speaking. What do you think?" And usually the number one bit of feedback that I give is you're trying to prove that you're smart and you belong on that stage. You don't even realize it. But it's diminishing your authority and it's diminishing the trust that you have with your audience. So that's a tough thing for people to do. But it's like if you're sitting with a buddy, with a friend, and you're just at the coffee shop and you're chatting about this weekend, you're not trying to impress that person, but you're having like this beautiful, like flowing conversation. That's what you want to do online. Now, one of the things that makes you really good at the coffee shop generally is that you storytell at like your most truest like level. And so if you want to humanize your brand, the second you let go of trying to sound smart, because like a wise person once says, dumb not to dumb it down, especially online, right? And at first I didn't understand that. I was like, dumb not to dumb it down. But really it's like I'm not trying to sound smart. I'm trying to have communion with this group, right? That's what communication is like. Communion with this audience that I'm speaking to. Now, the quickest way that you can do that is you can tell story. Now, people are like, well, story, what do you mean? Like by stories? Like I tell stories all the time, blah, blah. It's like, okay, so let me give you an example of this. And I am not, obviously, I'm not a therapist by any stretch, although some of my, I've had hundreds of employees over the years. Some might call me that. I don't know. But so I say these things out of ignorance. So, have some grace if you're listening to this right now. But like, let me give an example. One question that I'm sure people want to know when they engage or think about engaging a therapist is like, so what's your success rate? Does anybody just ever fail? Like, do they not achieve what you were hoping or what they were hoping to achieve by working with you? And the answer is, of course, yes. But just like attorneys don't like to talk about what happens if you lose your case, you like find one website where an attorney talks about or addresses the question, what happens if you lose? Like you can't find
Hmm.
it online. It doesn't exist, Joe. So failure is something that is very, very endearing if you talk about it with people. So, for example, if you online and you said to folks, so one question I get a lot as a therapist is, well, does it always work out? And it doesn't. In fact, let me tell you a story about what happened just recently. And then obviously, by protecting the privacy of your clients, you tell a story that helps someone see is like, oh, so you're like readily admitting that not everybody is a good fit, or not everybody benefits from working with you. When you say things like, I have found that here's who I work well with, but here's the type of person I don't work well with. And you say it in a non-snarky way, but in a truly like helpful way. Like these are things that people don't expect to hear. And so point being is I think storytelling is like one of these great underrated skills. And it's going to become more important with time, especially as like AI can answer a lot of questions online and produce a lot of content. But what AI doesn't necessarily do well for you, it doesn't tell your story well. It can't, right? It can't. I mean, of course, you could tell it your story and it could reword it. But point being is the storytellers are going to be the ones that build the strongest brands in the future. And that is definitively true for those that are listening to this. And I think it's very underutilized by clinicians across the board. And oftentimes, that kills their ability to connect with their audience and certainly with their potential clients. And that's what we've got to overcome.
Hmm. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Now, when you think about how trust is built in brands, um, let's start there, and then I'd love to move into as leaders of their companies, how they communicate with their staff. When you think about brands that build trust, like kind of what's the future of trust when it comes to brand building?
Yeah, let me just give you like some very practical things that you could do. You could do these things online. I just mentioned one. Have a page of your site that talks about very clearly, explicitly who you are and who you're not a good fit for. Okay. Don't just say
Mm.
like what you do, who you help, stuff like that. Who you are, who you're not a good fit for. Do it in an unbiased, non snarky, just very helpful way. So, for example, if I'm a pool guy and I'm talking about fiberglass pools, I would say, now, if you're looking for a swimming pool that an in-ground swimming pool that will cost you the least amount of money, and you're not really concerned, let's say like your biggest focus isn't longevity, your biggest focus is how can I get an in-ground pool now and spend the least amount of money to do it? Well, at that point, a vinyl liner pool might be the best fit for you because the initial price is the lowest price. Now, you notice I didn't say there, Joe. So if you're cheap and you don't want to pay for like quality, well, then you should get a vinyl liner pool. So I don't want to make that person feel dumb. I'm just going to be very, very honest about it. So that's an example. So you want to talk about who your clinic is and is not a good fit for. Extremely, extremely helpful. Another thing, and all these like have to do with just transparency that people don't necessarily expect. Um, one across all industries, and one thing that They Ask You Answer, my book, is very, very known for, that I'm known for, is helping companies learn how to talk about cost and price online. And so everybody wants to understand that very clearly. And so, like, let's say I was a therapist and I wanted to address the cost of working with me on my website. Well, what I would do, and a lot of people think is like, oh, I've got to put my hourly rates or this or that. You don't necessarily have to do that. But what matters is that you help someone understand what value looks like in your industry. So, for example, there's really five major components of a cost article or video. When you're explaining pricing, five components. What drives cost up in an industry? And so, in other words, if you're looking to get, let's say, some type of work with a therapist, what are the factors that drive cost up? Number two, what are the factors that drive cost down? Number three, why are some therapists more expensive or businesses? Number four, why are some businesses less expensive? So you might feel like, okay, they sounded similar, but the first two are based on the industry. Second set of two is based on the specific company. And then the final one is roughly, what do you charge your business, right? So if I was producing a video about this, I might say to someone, you know, one of the questions that a lot of people have if they're thinking about working with a therapist and benefiting from therapy is, well, how much is this going to cost me? And so understanding that this is a very valid and important question, what this video is going to do, it's going to explain to you a few different things. It's going to explain all the factors that go into pricing when it comes to the therapy space. We're going to talk about what drives cost up, what drives cost down, why some companies are more expensive, why some companies are less expensive, and we're going to give you a sense as to what we charge. And by the end of this, you should have a very good sense overall as to what you might spend if you're looking to work with a therapist in the future. So anybody hears that, they're going to be like, oh, this is so helpful. This is so great. So that's an example of a major trust driver. Let me give you another example of one. And I'll give you a couple other examples of ones here because these are like crazy effective for lead generation, Joe. And that is self-service. So self-service is a mega trend that's happening with businesses right now. What we know is 75% of all buyers would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. In other words, they don't really want to talk to a salesperson until they're good and ready. Now, you might say, well, in our space markets, it's a little bit different because, they reach out and then they, I'm sure depending on the size of the company, they might talk directly to the person that they're working with, or they might talk to some type of fielder first or whatever. But let me give you some examples of how to take advantage of self-service. One major example of this is having pricing estimators on your website. Now, this is pretty unheard of for a lot of folks, but it is the future of service-based businesses. So much so that I developed a tool called PriceGuy.ai, and now hundreds of companies around the globe, it's a startup company, but are already using this tool. And what we see is when you put a pricing estimator, keyword, on your website, how it works, it's an interactive tool. And so imagine somebody comes to your site and they're saying to themselves, I just want to get a sense for how much this is going to cost, something everybody wants to know. So you might have a pricing estimator that says, interested in finding out how much you would spend on a therapist? Get instant pricing here. Key phrase, get instant pricing here, or get an instant estimate here. And then what happens is your tool is going to ask them a series of questions, just like you would ask them on the phone. If somebody says, well, how much is this going to cost me? There's probably a series of questions that you would ask them to give them an overall sense for how much they're going to spend. Okay. And again, as I'm describing these things, listeners, have grace with me for being ignorant of your industry because I don't know your industry like you do. And so then what happens is after they answer these questions, at the end of it, they get a general range as to what they're likely to see in the industry or what they would likely spend with you. You can do either or both. Now, this is really powerful because you get out of this an email, they get out of this an answer. Trust goes up on both sides. Everybody wins. Your database wins. You get to remarket them, and you're giving them something nobody else has given them. And I've seen this done now in hundreds of industries because I've worked in so many industries. So, like I said, this tool is called PriceGuy.ai, and how it works is it doesn't matter the industry. By using this tool, it's powered by AI. It helps you to create in less than 30 minutes a working price estimator for the service that you offer that you can immediately put on your website. And what we see is the companies that put it on their site generate 3 to 5 times more leads than they previously generated from their website. So if you're averaging 5 leads a week, now you're going to get 15 by simply having a very visible pricing estimator on your site. Let me give you one more example of self-service that is phenomenal, Joe, that I've been doing with clients. It's crazy effective. Let's say that you have a clinic with multiple clinicians. We have found that when you allow people to go to your site, vet the person they're going to work with, and then self-select who they're going to work with. So in other words, imagine you've got 10 therapists that work for you. Again, this is me speaking out of ignorance. You've got 10 therapists that work for you. So they come to your site, they see all 10, they see their images, they see their bios. There's a video about that person that's just talking to the viewer. Now, what we've found is if you allow them to choose who they work with without having to talk to, let's say, a salesperson or whomever first, closing rates double every single industry we've done it with, Joe. So the future is one where we get to select the salesperson we want to work with, or in this case, the clinician or whoever the service professional is. Now, it sounds far-fetched to a lot of people, but that, I'm telling you, is a stunning game changer. Can you imagine your closing rates double simply because you give people the choice of who they want to work with?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of those, it's interesting because I feel like you're bringing together a lot of things that I've talked with people about, but not in this way. Like even just the idea of reducing friction on the homepage, where so often, a clinician or a potential client will come to the website. They click on schedule an intake or contact us, and then they fill out a form, and then it just goes into an email, and they have no sense of what happens next. And just
Yeah.
how we've seen that
It's
when
a huge
people
trust gap there. Big friction
right,
point, to your point.
right.
Yeah.
And then it's
Anything
like
that
if
eliminates friction and fear is a very potentially powerful thing online.
right, and we've seen that if people, even if they reverse the order of things, so some of the orders that people would typically do is, fill out all this information, and then eventually you get to maybe some sort of schedule that you could directly schedule. Usually it then says, our staff will contact you within 48 hours for this, when this person's ready for therapy now. And we found that actually if we start with the schedule where it says schedule an intake, and then it's like, oh, they don't have any openings on Tuesdays, that's the only day I'm free, then it's like, I guess I should call them to just see, instead of going through all these forms only to get to the end and then Tuesdays aren't even open. And so just that idea of having a scheduler there, but like what you're talking is that next level of building trust with not only that, but they can, make that buying decision of starting counseling, watching the videos, just making it easier.
100%. Everything is about making it easier, tearing away that trust gap that exists. Any fear, doubt, issue, concern, worry, like one of the biggest fears, if you're going to be working with a counselor, if you're going to be working with a therapist, is, am I going to gel with this person? And so, like, there's a high bit of anxiety before you meet them the first time. And so, what can we do to overcome that? I'm telling you, when they can select, to your point, if you have a self-scheduling tool combined with a self-selection tool, so they can schedule when they meet and who they meet with, you are going to be light years ahead of your competitors. Your conversion rates are going to be so much higher than anybody in your field. It's extraordinary. You do that and you tack on some type of pricing estimator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, forget about it. Forget about it. Now, as I said earlier, you got to be willing to show what others aren't willing to show. You got to be willing to sell in a way that others aren't willing to sell. See, what we just described, that's that right there, Joe. It's like, oh, I'm showing them a general price estimate. They're having an experience there, though. And because they're having an experience that was interactive in their mind, and they were designing their experience, they're answering these questions. And what happens is they've invested more time in you, in your company, in your brand. Sunk costs increase. As the sunk costs increase, they feel an obligation almost to themselves to do business with you. See, that's how it works. That's why any interactive tool like that is very powerful. When it comes to anything to do counseling, therapy, etc., self-service is the future of this entire industry. I mean, very much so. And if I was listening to this right now, I'd say, I am all in on that. I'm all in. It is the ultimate trust builder, and it's extraordinary for conversions. You're going to get way more leads. You get more leads, then you can be more selective of who you work with. You can scale your business faster, quicker to financial peace. I mean, the benefits go on and on. There's really no reason not to do it. And if you're hesitant, I'd say, okay, well, do you believe in the golden rule?
Hmm.
Not everybody believes in the Bible, but most people believe in the golden rule. Treat them as I would want to be treated in that moment. That's a really smart, honest, fair strategy. And so if you are on the site, would you want to be able to do those things? Answer is heck yeah, you would. So just look at your site and say, what things would I like to be able to do right now that I can't? Well, I'd like to be able to vet that counselor more. Yeah. Can I? No, there's no video about that person. Would I like to know who they are and who they're not a good fit for? Yeah. Would I like to see positive and negative reviews on their site? Yeah, that would be really helpful. It's like, you know,
Hmm.
it's like you think about an Amazon product page. Amazon product page has everything. It's got all this pricing information. It's got competitor information. It's got reviews. It literally has everything you want to know. That's data backed science right there. I mean, that is like they understand what you need to know. They want to eliminate all doubt. And if you eliminate all doubt, the only emotion that's left is trust. And then people
Mm.
buy.
Well, I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but would love for you to talk about trust within running a business. And I know that communication and how you talk to your staff is like a whole episode in and of itself. But maybe just
Yeah.
a couple nuggets on just how do we take trust and think about the future of trust specifically as a business leader.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we could spend a lot of time. Maybe one of these days we'll run it back and we'll talk about that. But I think a lot of leaders fail to train and teach communication to their staff. And I think this is something that we should do. And especially someone who's a counselor, a therapist, they've got like these innate communication skills that they should be, that they should be using. But just one simple example that we teach, and we teach this with anything to do with any important conversations. This could be a sales conversation. This could be a one-on-one with a team member. This could be a team meeting that you're going to have. We always teach that we have what's called the honest agreement. And I actually have had some therapists use this too, once like they've heard me talk about it in some of the interpersonal communication coaching, like stuff that I've done on stage. Basically, honest agreement sounds really simple. It is, but essentially says, hey Joe, let's say you and I were having a one-on-one, and you're an employee of mine. I was your manager or owner or whatever. I might say to you, so Joe, before we have this conversation today, I want you to know that you matter to me, and I value you, and because of that, my commitment to you is I'm going to be 100% honest, open, and candid with you today, because I feel like that's what you deserve, and I owe that to you. Is that fair, Joe? And Joe says, sure. And then I'm going to say, and at the same time, though, my ask for you is that you're incredibly open and honest with me, that you hold nothing back. My commitment is that anything you tell me today, I'm going to receive it as a gift. If I've done things that make you happy, if I've done things that make you frustrated, now's the time to share them. And if you don't hold back and if you share them with me, we're both going to grow and we're going to have an amazing experience. So, Joe, would you be willing to be that open and honest for this conversation we're having today? Joe says yes. And then bang, we're off. Now, we teach that exact same like that process right there. We do that for start of sales conversations. We do that for all types of important conversations. Now, people might say, well, it's assumed that we're going to be honest and open and candid. Yeah, but unless you verbally agree to it, you don't set the right energy and conditions to have this beautiful feeling or energy that enters the realm, the room in that moment, so that you can connect on a deeper level. So it's like nuances like that. Just a little, what's called the honest agreement. You start your important conversations with team members with that, Joe, it changes your life.
So awesome. Marcus, the final question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I would just say that I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, and it sounds almost so lame, but I just believe in it so much. It's dumb not to dumb it down. You don't need to sound smart. What you need to do is you need to connect. And the way you're going to connect is by being yourself and by telling a clear story. If you do that, you're going to find a strong audience that is attracted to you. But it starts with not needing to prove yourself. And so if you're intimidated about going online, doing more video, doing the things that you need to do to build a trusted and known brand, well, just remember, you're enough already. You're enough. You don't need to impress anybody. You are where you are for a reason. And so hopefully that resonates with your audience, Joe.
So awesome. Marcus, if people want to connect with you, I know there's a new version of your book coming out. Tell us about that and where they can pick that up.
Yeah, I've got it's the Ask You Answer 3.0. It's called Endless Customers. So go to Amazon right now, Endless Customers. You can also go to endlesscustomers.com and you can order it there. You can find me though on LinkedIn. I'm a dang good follow on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, listen to this, make sure you connect with me. And like I said, check out Price Guide AI as well, priceguide.ai. Really powerful tool that could really help anybody that is in a service-based business.
So awesome. Thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
My pleasure.
Well, I took a ton of notes. I went and checked out that website while Marcus and I were talking, and even just thinking about the way we offer our consulting packages, between what Marcus said and also a story I heard Simon Sinek say recently, it really makes me kind of think through just continuing to improve that. I saw this thing where Simon Sinek was talking about this shoe salesman in the 1950s that just like killed it. And he found that if a lady came in, he sold specifically women's shoes. If she came in and said, I want to try on that pair of shoes, he would bring out a second pair of shoes that he thought they might like too, but never a third. If someone said, I want to see that pair of shoes, he'd say, which of these shoes do you want me to take back to the back? And that just idea of removing the decision making. And it's just like, as we learn these things, we have to figure out, how do we apply that to our businesses? How do we think through using human psychology that we all know so well, but sometimes don't even apply to our practices? How do we use that in a way that helps people make a better decision to work with the best therapists that they can here at our practices? Speaking of the best, Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They are our sponsor for today's show. If you're using one of those other EHRs, I'm telling you, so many of our members are using Therapy Notes now, and it's helping them get organized with their billing, going even smoother with their billers and their accountants. TherapyNotes.com, use promo code Joe at checkout. You'll get a couple months for free. And also then they know that supporting this podcast is helping them get new leads. So again, TherapyNotes.com, use promo code Joe at checkout. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.